Hi, everybody. It's Scott Stoltz with Create Your Great. Happy Tuesday afternoon. And I'm sitting with Matt Denoncourt.
Cheers.
And we are at a work bar in Brighton, Mass. And we were just talking, we were meeting about some business and other things today. And we got into talking about Tim Ferriss's book, The 4-Hour Work Week, which is a great book, a good book on so many levels in terms of the principles that it teaches. Matt and I have both read the book, and we talked about this book before. But first of all, welcome and
Thank
hello.
you. Thank you for having me. Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me.
And so I asked Matt to jump on and let's talk and share a little bit about some of the really good principles that we both took from that book.
Yeah.
Because one thing, and I want to let you run with this, one of the, what I wanted to tee off with or start with is that I even thought this when it came out. It came out 10 years ago, or now 11 years ago. And I thought it literally meant what the title insinuated, work 4 hours a week, but that is not what the book is about. Did you have that impression early on about that book with the 4-hour work week?
I didn't judge the book by its cover to speak. I had read a lot of entrepreneurial articles, and they list like the top 10 books that entrepreneurs read, or these billionaires recommend these 5 books or whatever. And that one had always come up. And I forgot what made me click on Amazon and say, okay, let's go ahead and buy it. Let's go ahead and read it. But when I did, I just couldn't put it down because, and it's actually the only book I've ever reread completely.
Wow.
And that just goes, and I'm not much of a reader. Even growing up, I had a difficulty reading. It was kind of force-fed to me through law school.
You're a lawyer. You don't
I
read?
am a lawyer, yeah. Don't hold it against me, please. But it just, I think the thing that really, the biggest takeaway from the book was that it just opened a new way of thinking and a different mindset. Because we kind of come into a mindset of the working world that you need to have your W-2 employee job, 40 hours a week, clock in at 9 and leave at 5, Monday through Friday, and the weekends are meant for your own. And even if you're an entrepreneur, you kind of assume that you have to work 20 hours a day slaving over something and only, and then doing it out of your, the garage, or, you read all these success stories of doing it out of your dorm room or what have you. But honestly, I think it just said, no, you don't have to do that. There's no reason to. There are other ways of doing it, and they're easier. So we come into this mindset of all these things that we take for granted, even the concept of an entrepreneur or startups failing. Like it was the failure rate, 90% of startups fail. Well,
It might even be higher than that, but yeah.
But what does that mean? What does failure mean? Is Toys R Us a failure? Is Toys R Us a startup's failure? I mean, that company's been around for almost 100 years and made millions and millions of dollars for their entrepreneur. But for the guy who founded it, I mean, he created this empire of brick and mortar toy shops, which, as a kid, I remember going to them and having fun and enjoying them. Yeah. So, is that considered a failure?
Not well, in the modern day or present day, yes, now. But you're right. You actually make a really good point, because if you look back and look at the whole picture, start to finish, you really can't call it a failure.
Right.
So there's a lot to learn from the principles of this book. You can even read a shortened version or some takeaways, which we can share a few with them right now. So if you've heard of the 4-Hour Work Week, whether you watch this for a few minutes live today on your lunch or you check it out later and you're watching this on recording, feel free to jump in and comment either something you learned from the 4-Hour Work Week, or if you have a question for Matt and I about one of our takeaways from the book and some of what Matt has already teed us up with, because it really, let's unpack that a little bit more. It really changes, and it kind of breaks the mold of the traditional get a job, go to work from like 8 to 5 or 5:30, etc., and come home and you have the rest of your life. I really love the way it burst that door down. And one of the things that I learned from that book that it did is about we actually have more control than we believe. We are conditioned for years from the time that we're in school through college and then getting a job. We are so conditioned about following certain procedures and rules, some of which aren't bad. It's not that they're bad. It's just we're conditioned to think we have to do things a certain way. And Tim, in that book, I think really helped people understand through a number of different ways, no, you have more control than you think.
Right. And I think Tim's concepts in this book aren't new or novel or anything. They've been around for hundreds of years. I just think that what he did was he was able to condense and solidify and make them just point blank real, especially for the 21st century. and I forgot where I was going with that. I'm sorry. I blanked on that.
I'll throw one back in your lap.
Sure.
So one of the things that he did was he introduced the concept of virtual assistants.
Right.
And how, so those didn't really exist even 20 years ago, but now with the help of virtual assistants, there's so much that we can accomplish in a day or a week that we didn't think we could do before.
Right, exactly. So virtual assistants, as you probably know, are just having an assistant that you can pay at an hourly rate online to provide services to your projects for you. And at the time that Tim had written this, I think it was about 07, 08. So at that time, it was pre-recession, and also the exchange rates were different. But he opened up the idea that, Fortune 500 companies up until that point had been outsourcing a lot of their services to places like India and China. That's just been the model since the 1980s. Well, that's also available to solopreneurs or small businesses. There's no reason why you can't go ahead and outsource your call center, or outsource your research, or outsource your accounting or bookkeeping to a firm in India for a exchange rate which is better than hiring someone full-time here in the United States. And just that, even if it's something that you may believe in, it's okay with you to accept that, you can go ahead and outsource that. Or if you would rather keep it close to home and help out American businesses, regardless of what the idea, the concept that comes away from that is that these things are possible. That there is no barrier to stop us from going ahead and doing what Fortune 500 companies are doing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that. Great message. And have any of you ever used a virtual assistant? Have you ever used somebody, whether it was offshore or local? When I started my business, I hired a recent college grad to do a lot of behind-the-scenes things, a lot of logistical scheduling, some of my social media. And I read Tim's book, and I considered hiring somebody remotely or in India, but I wanted to meet the person.
Right.
I wanted to meet the person. So have you used a VA?
I have. When I was working on this project where I was creating a website for small and mid-sized community theaters, which I had experience in. I'm a theater major. And I worked with small and mid-sized community theaters on the back end, the operations management, and also on stage stuff as well. But one of the things I wanted to do was create a website for those community theaters to not only use ticketing software, which was mostly available through large ticketing companies, but also a forum where they can communicate and create ideas and share and collaborate and work across different states, because normally community theaters kind of stick to the community, but there may be a community theater on the other side of the country that's doing the exact same production, and maybe they want to get ideas on how they produced it, what kind of concepts they use, theatrically, artistically. Mm-hmm. So that was the whole concept. Long story short, I actually worked with a firm in India that created the website and the software in order to implement that. And I can't tell you how much it cost compared to doing it in the United States. It was still a hefty amount of money, but long story short, I did use it. I would imagine that having someone do the same service here in the United States that this company provided for me,
I'm sure
probably, it was probably more. And the communication barrier there is none. They spoke English fluently, communicated through email, telephone. Granted, the telephone conversations had to be timed with the time changes, and it worked just as if I were to hire someone and meet them in person in Boston or wherever I was living in Rhode Island at the time, in Rhode Island. Mm-hmm. So,
what did this book help you with in terms of? I remember distinctly, I was working in corporate when I read the book. What did it help you with in terms of dealing with people in the office, be it your boss or coworkers, just your mindset around that corporate environment and some of the things that you had to do in your job?
That's a good question, because I read it after. I think I read it after I left the corporate world, so right. I wouldn't know.
How about porting it over now to thinking about? Because one of the things that stuck out to me was how to go and approach management and your boss. And for those of you who've read the book, or if you read it in the future, there's a lot of good information and insight and principles in there about how to approach, hey, I would like to work remotely. Mm-hmm. I would like to have a couple days a week where I work from home. I need 3 weeks to travel to such and such a location, but here's the value I can show you. Here are the things that I can get done while I'm away, so that management, your bosses, can see that there's not going to be a drop a drop off. I thought that was really, really helpful.
Yeah, I forgot, what was it? There was an analogy that, or not an analogy, but an acronym that he used. Was it READ? R-E-A-D? D-A?
Sounds familiar. I don't remember.
I forgot what it was, but one of them was mostly geared towards the employee who wanted to create the 4-hour work week while still being, reporting to someone, whether at a mid-size or a large company, and having that management-employee relationship. And he gave a couple tips, just like you were saying, on how to frame the conversation. He actually even, I think he spells it out for you on how to actually say it word for word, or gives an example of someone who had done that. And I remember one example in particular where a salesman, I think at a large like IBM type company, a software company, had gotten married to a woman in China and ended up spending an extra 2 months out there. Not even, letting the company know, but just still being available and still doing the work that he needed to do, to the point where management didn't even notice he was gone.
We need to continue to help lead the charge to change the way some of the rules are laid out, some of the processes in corporate America. And hey, I've always said, I'm definitely pro-capitalism, I'm pro-growth, I'm pro-companies doing really well. I am not anti any of that. But what I am anti, or what I do believe we should do, is we need to just break down some of these walls. Just because something's been done for X number of years doesn't mean that it's right or that it needs to stay the same way. Be empowered. And I felt like this book, I felt like Ferriss's book also gave me another sense and a whole other level of empowerment to say, not only here's some of the things you can do, but it's okay to do this. Like, you can create, you can bring new ideas to the table. And by the way, and he was clear on this, if it doesn't work for you in your current work environment, you might want to find a different work environment, or better yet, create a better work environment for yourself.
Yeah. Two thoughts I had on what you just said there, and I agree wholeheartedly. The biggest takeaway from this book was that and it sounds kind of pessimistic, but I like to look at it this way, is that it's all a mind game. And that sometimes when we say, oh, I need to show up to work at 9 o'clock, or even the thought of showing up late to work because maybe you overslept makes you nervous or anxious, or you got stuck in traffic, is your boss going to fire you for being 15 minutes, 30 minutes late if you're working a career position? That anxiety, where does that come from? It comes from a rule that was never spelled out in the employee handbook. Maybe I'm giving a bit of a personal example. Of course, everyone's situation is different. But, that anxiety came from me. And what was the rule that I was anxious about breaking? Well, it was the rule in my head that I had to show up before 9 o'clock every day. So the biggest thing I took away from that was that it's a mind game. And in terms of being in charge of your own career, there's another person that I read a lot of in terms of career coaching and career development, and it's Liz Ryan. Are you familiar with Liz Ryan at all?
No.
She's a regular writer for Forbes, and she writes a regular piece on things to do when you're going into an interview, working with bosses, figuring out when it's time to leave. But one of the biggest things that she takes away, that one of the takeaways I got from her, was that you are the CEO of your own career, which I know is right down your alley, and what you help everyone out there do. Yeah. So
important. We gotta own it.
Yeah.
It's up to us. So what would you give, let's wind down the last couple of minutes, and hey Jillian, thanks for checking in, and I'll read while Matt's talking in a minute here. I'll check out what you sent over to us.
Yeah, thanks Jillian.
What advice would you give? I know you've done a variety of things in your life and you have a legal background. If somebody came to you and said, hey, I'm going to start a business, or I'm looking to create something new, what are some of the principles that have served you well that you would share with somebody? Oh
gosh, well first of all, someone came to me saying, oh, I want to start a business. I get so excited. And I just go, yes, do it. What would I give for advice? I would recommend reading The 4-Hour Workweek, because, just for me and just the mindset of someone who maybe doesn't think that they can do it, maybe they feel like they're trapped in that career mode and they're afraid of really acting on that idea, which comes from a place of passion, or what have you. It's The 4-Hour Workweek really opens your mind to saying, okay, yeah, I can do it. There are other books I'd recommend as well. Daniel DiPiazza. It's Rich 20-something, which he kind of gears it more towards the millennial generation, but I think it's universal in the concepts that he discusses. So the biggest recommendation I would give is to do it. Things will happen in time as you begin the process, and you'll need help. And having good people on your side, whether they be friends, loved ones, or professionals, or lawyers, the people that you can surround yourself with, a good team you can surround yourself with, just ask questions and to be able to bounce ideas off of. And at the end of the day, you gotta do it. You gotta do it.
Amen to that.
So.
And we learn as we go, we grow along the way, and we evolve. And there's no such thing as perfect, no such thing. But we can go out and we can create and give it our all, and be very mindful and make good decisions. Nothing reckless about it. And that's why asking good questions and surrounding yourself with good people helps a lot.
Yes,
too.
absolutely.
For sure. Well, Matt, this has been fun to talk about. Jillian is just reaffirming a lot of what we've already said, so thanks again, Jillian.
Thank you.
And I know we both enjoyed this book a lot, and I think there's a lot to get out of it. And if you catch this later recorded, feel free to drop in a comment or a question, and we'll be happy to get back to you, or just share your experience or your takeaways from Tim Ferriss's The 4-Hour Workweek. Matt, good to see you again. We'll have to catch up again soon.
Thank you very much, Scott.
All right, thanks everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.